What's going on, guys? Jordan here. This video is kind of a quick impromptu follow-up to a lot of the questions and comments that were posted on a recent video I put up called Gain Staging, the Truth About Proper Gain Staging in Your Mix. So I kind of made my position hopefully pretty clear there, but this generated a lot of discussion, and I had some emails and people asking, maybe you could address some of those questions and comments that came up because some of them are pretty good. So that's what I'm going to do in this video, and hopefully just go a little bit deeper and further on this. And my hope still is to kind of help you put this whole topic to rest. Now, this is my most watched, at least in the shortest amount of time, and the most commented and most disliked video I've ever put up. So if you haven't watched it yet, definitely click the little pop-up here and go watch the original gain staging video first. But I want to start off by just saying the fact that this video generated so much discussion and so many comments. I mean, number one, it obviously proves this is still a very hot topic in our digital audio community here, but it also kind of proves my point in a way, because look at how much time and effort was spent debating and going back and forth about gain staging and levels in the DAW and all these things and different ways to approach it. It's focusing so much on that as opposed to just going and mixing, right, and doing the things that will actually make your mix sounds better. It kind of goes to just prove my point of how people are over focusing on this. And yes, I realize the irony of me making yet another video is kind of just feeding into that, so I'm not going to keep going back and forth about this, but I do think it was worth kind of responding to some of the questions and clearing stuff up. And as we kind of go into, and I kind of respond to some of the, let's say, negative comments, by the way, I'm not threatened by those, and I'm not trying to defend myself against it, but I'm really just trying to clarify and hopefully make you guys continue to feel free of kind of this burden of, quote, gain staging. So there were lots of great comments and questions. Here's one here. Chris Meyer said, "On point, Jordan." Thanks, Chris. Jay said, "This made me feel so much better." Good, that was my goal. One of my favorite comments here, Randy said, "I feel like I can finally enjoy mixing and life in general after watching this video." That was my favorite ever, because, and you can see this comment got 19 likes too. But that was my goal with this video, is from talking to lots of up-and-coming engineers, it was clear that people were really worried about stuff that didn't matter, all numbers and theory and all this stuff, and it's keeping them from actually just trying to mix the best that they can. So if that video and hopefully this one combined will help free you and just make you feel like, I can kind of just breathe easy again and just get on with mixing, that's my goal here. We had another good tip here. So some people kind of are basically meeting in the middle, versus just kind of saying, you can just ignore this whole discussion, just get on with mixing. I'm a little bit more in that camp. But here was actually a pretty good tip. He said, for digital, record into your DAW at around -12. Make sure you're not clipping your pre and converters, and you're fine. It really isn't complicated. Yeah, that's great. I mean, I was saying in my video that I don't really even look at numbers. I just kind of watch the meters and basically do exactly what you're saying there. I think that is good advice. If you're looking still for a number or a guideline, that works right there. So let's get into some of the other stuff that was brought up. So one of the common things was people were saying, okay, so you said not to worry about gain staging, but in the end of the video you showed yourself gain staging. And yeah, I guess you're right. I just never thought of it as gain staging, because the way that's presented mostly online is using a trim plugin or something else, some other method to bring all of your tracks down to a predetermined level, a predetermined peak level or average level, usually -18 dB, before you even start mixing. And a lot of people worry about that and try to make sure that they measure each track to make sure the level's hitting that point. So my point was just basically that, that's mixing by numbers, and when you're mixing by numbers, that's just not a good thing. You need to use your ears, right? This is still an art form, right? It's not a science. And someone else commented, I'd like to see these people who are obsessed with the numbers and the theory like this, I'd like to see them mix with their speakers muted and just use analyzers and graphs and numbers on the screen and see how the mix sounds. I think we all know how that would turn out. So yeah, I guess technically I'm gain staging, but my main point is that I didn't want to, I'm not using numbers, I'm not fussing over the levels. It's really just by eye, making sure that everything's got lots of headroom and it's conservative and feels solid, and that's it. And we just move on. I don't really focus or even give it any thought. I mean, I kind of just over time did that stuff automatically without having to go and search for some formula or some rule to follow. That's the point I'm trying to get across. So that covers one of those. Let's clarify something here. A couple of people, including Chris here, said, all good info. Only issue with the all selection to bring down the faders is this will affect the level going to subgroups and your mix bus. Therefore, your compression, saturation, and effects won't have the same relationship when you pull down the faders. Yes, this is absolutely true. So if you get into your mix and you're too hot and you use my tip of hitting the all group and bringing all the faders down at the same time, then yes, when you're feeding buses or what you're feeding the master fader, if you have plugins on your buses or a master fader, of course that's going to bring down the level of those, which is going to affect the processing that you have on there. So of course, if you have to do that at a late stage in your mix, you're going to have to adjust that processing. Or you could just, instead of turning down the individual tracks, turn down the buses. If everything's going to buses, just turn those down, and then that way you only have to worry about what's going to the master fader and not all the individual buses. I should clarify with this, this is absolutely true and something to keep in mind. For me, if I'm ever doing that in a mix, like hitting all the faders and bringing them all down together to free up some headroom, I'm only doing that pretty much like very early, in the early stages of the mix. Like once I really get into the creative flow and I'm EQing, compressing, automating, processing, all that stuff, by that time, I've already got the levels somewhere where I know I'm not going to run out of headroom. So this is something to do really early on in the mix, probably before you have a ton of bus processing and all that stuff going on, so that if you do have to bring them down, it's not really affecting anything because you haven't really done all that heavy lifting yet. That's when I would recommend dealing with this. All right, so like I said, this was kind of my most disliked video. So let's get into a couple of the comments that were not really on board. So here's one from Recording Studio 9. It said, not sure he fully understands. There are no myths about gain staging. So you're saying as long as a bridge looks good, it doesn't matter how strong it is? Well, this just doesn't work. Of course, it matters how strong a bridge is, just as more than it matters how good it looks, right? But this really breaks down because it's not like the end listener who's listening to your mix and listening to your record is thinking to themselves, okay, this mix sounds really good, but I don't know if the gain staging is right. I hope the gain staging is correct so that I know this is a good mix, but I think it is because it sounds good. And on the other side, no one listens to a mix and says, I don't like how this sounds. Kind of sounds weird. Kind of sounds bad, and it's probably because of gain staging. There's just no one does that, right? No, like in this world, there's one thing that matters, especially to the end listener. That's what we're making music for, right? For people to listen to. It's not for engineers to geek out over. And there's one thing that matters, and that's the end product. So will people like it or not? And guess what? Sorry to burst your bubble. I'm one of you guys, but all of us engineers, it has less to do with us than we think. How many records do you love or did you love growing up that really don't sound amazing? They don't sound pristine or top-notch sound quality-wise, but because the songs are good and because at least it was good enough to get the intention and the emotion and the character of the artist and the song across, that's what makes people fall in love with it. Our job is just to hopefully maximize that and present that in the best possible way to the listener, and that's it. So it has even less to do with us than we think. And this is just a perfect example of, focusing on things that no one cares about. If you went to watch a movie and the story totally sucked, but at the end of the film, the guys come on and they tell you how they did all the lighting right and they followed all the rules of video production, you'd still be sitting there thinking like, okay, well, I was still bored and the movie still sucks. People don't care about this. This is why, you shouldn't mix too much in solo, because the end listener's not hearing anything in solo. They're only hearing the whole mix. And same with gain staging, just saying, is it okay to say that a bridge looks good even if it's not strong? Well, it's not really the same thing at all, because really one thing matters. It's the end product, and is the listener going to enjoy listening to it or not? No one is thinking about gain staging when they're listening to a final mix. So it's pretty much completely irrelevant. As far as I'm concerned, you could have all the gain staging wrong, strong emphasis on the quotes there. You could have everything clipping inside and have all of the wrong levels going into your plugins all over your mix. And but if it sounds good in the end, if I can just pull it up on iTunes and hit play and bob my head and I enjoy listening to it, I could care less what's going on under the hood. And neither does, and that's how everyone else feels too that's listening to your final record. So keep that in mind and don't go too far down the rabbit hole on this stuff. Again, that's the point I'm trying to make here. We had a lot of comments saying that, hey, this isn't the same for analog gear. Be careful if you're using analog gear. People saying, okay, maybe that's cool for in the box, but if you were ever mixing live sound, you would be really screwed. I concede. I'm not mixing live sound. I've never really mixed live sound, and I don't desire to. Like I said, right off the top in the video, this is about in-the-box mixing, so I'm specifically talking about that and addressing those concerns. I don't mix with outboard gear in, and I don't mix on an analog console, so that's kind of a different discussion as far as I'm concerned. And yes, I'm sure, especially mixing in a live scenario, you would need to have a little bit more control over the gain staging and making sure you're keeping things on point there. But for 98, 99% of people who are watching this channel, that's not a reality. We're talking about in the box mixing with DAWs here. So let's go on to one more. Someone said Fletcher Munson curve and then redo this video. That has nothing to do with this whole discussion, actually. So, yeah, Fletcher Munson curve has to do with how our brains, our ears hear different frequencies as the volume goes up that we're listening at. So really that has nothing to do with gain staging. I just want to point that out in case someone reads that comment and then goes down yet another rabbit hole. I mean, even that, why would you even think about that when you're mixing? Like, just mix. Just mix. That's what I'm saying. So guys, listen, I just wanted to make this little follow-up video to hopefully clarify some things if you're reading all those comments and it's making you feel even more conflicted, because here I am saying to just forget all this stuff and simplify it, but then it's just spurring on more debate. Listen, here is the bottom line. If there's one thing I want you to take away, it's this. Personally, I've always taken the common sense approach. And when I started out engineering and mixing in the box, I've always been in the box, no one was talking about this stuff. Like, it was not a discussion, and there wasn't really as much action on the internet as there is now. I'm talking like more than 10 years ago when I started now. So it just wasn't a thing, and so I never really focused on it. It was always just common sense. If stuff was clipping, if it was too hot, I would just turn it down. It only takes one time to record everything too hot and hear distortion and clipping, and you'll never do that again, right? It's just common sense. It's just common sense, guys. You just react to what's happening, and don't overcomplicate it by overthinking everything. Just if it's too hot, turn it down. And here's the thing, with that approach, even though some people would think it's like, oh, it's not proper, you still need to know all the rules so that you can go and mix. Well, it's like, I don't know, guys. I've never paid attention to gain staging in the way that it's presented now online. And I've been able to make records that millions of fans around the world have heard. And so I'm not saying that to say, like, I win or something like that, but I'm just saying that to hopefully, again, try to free you from all of this weird debate and obsession over things like gain staging and all these mixing rules that just really don't matter at all. And ultimately, this stuff is not what makes your mixes good in the box. So, even I'll go as far as to say maybe having the right levels into your plugins, especially the analog modeled ones, if you do that and focus on that, maybe it's going to make a 5% difference in the quality of your mix. I think I'm being a little generous there, but maybe a 5% difference in the quality of your mix. Yet, look at how much time has been spent watching these gain staging videos, including mine, and discussing and debating that when it contributes maybe 5%, versus, learning how to create one good mixing chain with EQ and compression and saturation on a single track like a kick or a snare drum. That's going to do so much more for your mix than worrying about this gain staging stuff. We're talking about 80% changes versus a 5% change across your whole mix. So that is the bottom line, guys. Wherever you fall on this, just remember that's not the thing that's going to take your mixes from amateur, from demo quality up to pro and sounding like it belongs on a label release. It's just not the thing that's going to make the difference. So I hope that this video clarifies some of the questions that maybe were coming up in the comments there. I'm happy to go back and forth with you guys on this. But again, I don't want to direct even more attention to this topic because I think it's holding a lot of people back, which a lot of comments said. They said once they kind of got away from this kind of almost fear of gain staging and these rules, their mixes got a lot better. So that's what I want for all of you guys. Just focus on the stuff that actually matters, which is just using your ears and mixing with feel and just trying to get the best sounds you can out of the mix. And that's what matters, and that's what the end listener cares about. So don't get caught up in all this noise, whether it's gain staging, different EQ rules, and all this stuff. Just mix. Just use your ears. Just do what sounds good, what feels good, and you'll be much better off. All right. Take care.